One. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Cook sitting in for Lynn Miller P's Leadership Connection here. LeadershipEvansville.org. At Leadership Evansville is our website, and at social media on Twitter and Facebook. I am not Lynn Miller P's. I'm sitting in for her here this Saturday morning, and I've got a special treat. We're doing a pre-recorded show here with my good friend Denise Thomas. Denise Thomas, Evansville native. Welcome back to Evansville.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me. I am absolutely excited to be home, and thank you for sharing this platform. Out of all the speaking engagements I've had, this is the most important to me because this is where I'm from. This is home.
Yep, and that's why when I heard that you were going to come into town, this is actually being recorded. You were in town speaking at the Young Professional Conference, and that was out at USI, correct?
It was the dopest conference that I have experienced in a long time. Yes, it was at University of Southern Indiana. The president, who just started July 1st, and his name leaves me, but he was the closing speaker. It was a life-changing event. So for those that did not attend this year, make sure that you follow the YP conference for 2019.
And that's with the Young Professional Alliance through the Chamber, I believe.
Correct.
It's one of the sponsors in the Multicultural Professionals Network.
Yes.
Engage, develop, empower. And I'm reading right from the flyer. It's got your picture here on it. Today's young professional, or YPs, are tomorrow's leaders. Join some of the Tri-State's best and brightest. Loosely defined as under 40, give or take. I've been invited to, you're pushing the same age I am.
Right. We're pushing 29, y'all.
Loosely,
29.
I'm checking in at 42. I'm not going to talk for Denise here because I know you're talking about a lady's age. But, it's a powerful morning of professional development along with networking. Speakers cover topics such as management, skills, branding, finding your strengths, and much more. The conference also included an amazing opportunity to network with local executives. And I see here Denise Thomas, Harrison High School graduate,
yes,
and my classmate, class of 94. Denise Thomas, president of the Effective Communications Coach LLC, the keynote speaker. So what did you talk about on that talk earlier today?
We talked about a variety of subjects, but the main thing that I wanted people to leave with, based on my keynote address, was being your best authentic self and embracing truly what you're passionate about as it applies to whatever you do as part of your profession. And we also talked about, and when I say we, I mean myself and the audience, as a public speaker, for me, it's an experience. And there's two parties that are involved in any type of keynote address, and that is those on the speaking side as well as the receiving side. And it's my responsibility to make sure that whoever is on the receiving side leaves changed differently from how when they came in the door. So that is what was my main area of focus, and I think everyone left changed.
That loosely under the age of 40, what was the youngest individual maybe there in the room if you were to gauge?
That's a great question. So Chris, we had a breakout where it was called Lunch Like a Boss.
Okay.
And it was basically tables broken out to where you could have lunch with one of the executives that were there.
Okay, I was about to say, when you say like a boss, I had to shift gears there for a second, but...
And she was 19.
19?
19 years old.
Wow. So you had a very diverse age group there from 19 up until 40-ish, give or take.
Yes.
And how many folks were engaged in this event this morning?
Here's the crazy part, Chris. They anticipated about 100 people.
Yeah.
There was almost 200 people, 168 attendees during the inaugural conference. That's huge.
And
huge.
We talk about servant leadership on this show with Lynn Miller P's week in and week out, and then I get to guest host from time to time here on 98.5 WEOA. Let's shift gears a little quick. Was there anything that you wanted to finally talk about, that you didn't cover at the conference that you might want to share with the listeners today, or just give like a 2-minute elevator speech of what happened, in the keynote?
Chris, that's a great question, and I really want to specifically target this to those that are listening that live and reside and were born in Evansville. There's a perception of Evansville in terms of limitedness and division and segregation and lack of opportunities and crime. And unfortunately, that is not just an Evansville thing. And I, as a resident of Milwaukee, can say that these are epidemics that plague a variety of communities, and it's something that we need to focus on. What Evansville did today as it relates to the Young Professionals Conference was not only groundbreaking, but it really allowed people to understand that each of us as individuals have the capability to be impactful leaders.
Now let's talk a little bit about that. You know, you're currently a resident in Milwaukee. That's up in Wisconsin for the uninitiated here. And I see you're a Buck season ticket holder.
I used to be.
Okay.
I'm trying to get back as a Buck season ticket. You know, they're building a new arena, so
Yeah.
Milwaukee there's a lot of great things happening in Milwaukee.
I know. Now, your background in history, obviously, you're a product of the EVSC. You grew up here in Evansville, I believe.
Yes.
You're at Hebron Hawk.
Hebron Hawk, Plaza Pacer, and Harrison Warrior.
Now, from there, where did you go? How did you get from Evansville, a product of the EVSC, all the way to Milwaukee and then back again?
Employment. I lived in 6 different states, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin was the first, from my lens, big city that I resided once I left Evansville in 2003. And as far as being a product of EVSC, you know, a lot of things have changed, Chris, since you and I were in high school.
Just a few.
Yeah, and a lot of those, to be candid, have been for the better. When you and I went to school, it was rare that people that outside of athletics, I know you were a big football player, that did not collaborate, that didn't look like one another.
And, you know, I didn't really appreciate that myself until I got to college. You know, I assumed my experience was one that everybody had, where we had a very diverse group at Harrison. I'm going to say that. And I assumed that everybody, you know, until you get away from here, you don't realize not everybody has that same experience growing up. You know, I was blessed to be in a family, and, you know, I call family, you know, the football team was like the family. You know, I had academic teams, stuff like that. It just, that was the family, and we had a good thing going here in the early 90s on the east side of Evansville. And when I got to college, I realized that a lot of people didn't have those opportunities that I had. And I was shocked. I mean, I honestly was shocked. You know, most people think Evansville, Indiana, it's not a very diverse area, but I had had more experiences with different cultures and different backgrounds than many of the people I went to college with, you know, that early on in that freshman year. But what we had in the 90s, you know, and I hate to always go back in the time machine, but we were really lucky what we had here. Now, were there areas of opportunity? Yes, there were. You know, there were many incidents and stuff of opportunity. When I look back, you know, I had that family. I had that football background. Not everybody had that.
Right.
And I just don't know, you know, where I'm going with this, but it seems like we still got a ways to go on a lot of those things.
We do. And I don't think that will ever be an end process. We're always going to be a work in progress in any instance that is specifically regarding ethnicity, racism, diversity, and inclusion. I think what we have to do better is stop managing diversity and inclusion as a project or a formality, and really understand that it is a key component to the overall growth and success of any initiative. And it's not just about what we see on the outside. It's not about you looking at me and seeing a black woman, or me looking at you and seeing a white man. It's about understanding that regardless of my age, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, there is something about me as an individual that has the capability of being a strong leader.
You've always, I mean, I've never viewed you of anything less than a strong leader, you know, even back, and it's like, what shocked me when I got to college, because that was the only time I've ever experienced outside of Evansville, is how people throw those definitions on people. Like, they would see just a black lady. You know? And I was kind of shocked. You know, it was kind of like a wake-up call, because that's not the way I was raised. And I learned more about some people, you know, in college just from their opinions, you know, in the classroom. It was like a big mix of stuff, and it just, I feel like we were blessed to have those opportunities. Now, here lately, I feel like we might have taken a couple steps back, not necessarily Evansville, but as, you know, not just Milwaukee, not just Evansville, but as society in general. I look at this and I'm like, this wasn't the way it was when I grew up, you know? And I think we handled things a lot better as far, now, were there areas of opportunity? There's always areas of opportunity, you know? But it just seems like we've got to continue to move the discussion forward, and those are not easy discussions to have. And in our, instant gratification, I call it the Instagram society, folks want that instant satisfaction. They don't want to deal with the hard issues head on.
Right.
They want that satisfaction. And this is an issue as we talk about diversity, inclusion, some of those things. There's not an easy answer.
Right.
There's not something that's going to say, here in 15 minutes, you sit through this program, you're going to be good to go and we're going to make a difference. It's going to be a work in progress.
It will always be. And let me just say two things. When you and I were in high school and growing up in the 90s, there's a saying, ignorance is bliss. And what we didn't know is what we didn't know. The power of technology as it relates to video recording capability, on a device that is as small that can fit in your hand.
It's like a mobile movie theater.
Exactly. In social
movie
media.
Studio. I mean, the editing ability that you have in the palm of your hand.
Right.
And the fact that you can press send and it can be around the world in a matter of seconds. I would not have wanted that in my hands at the age of 17 here growing up in Evansville. And
some people, it's a con. It's not a pro. However, when it goes back to the topics that we are talking about today, the things that have been revealed, I am glad that we have that, because police brutality, sexual harassment or sexual assault in the workplace, mass incarceration, lack of health care, social injustice, these are all things now that can no longer be denied or reduced, because you're seeing it. You're seeing it as it happens. And so for us, a lot of the things, like when Rodney King, that was unheard of. It happened in the 60s during the Civil Rights Movement, but to happen in 1992.
I remember we were freshmen or sophomores?
We were sophomores.
Yeah, sophomores.
And I remember that day. I remember being at high school.
And I remember a lot of people were upset and they went down in the cafeteria.
And we had a conversation.
There was
a lot of tension. Now, Cookie, look, and I can say Cookie because
that's what she can call me, because going back to that, I might have a nickname, it might be Cookie. Denise has that privilege to call me Cookie here on Leadership Connection, so I figured that would get discussed.
Because you're my brother, so
I know,
you're always going to be Cookie. But Cookie, one of the things I was going to say is we need the visibility that we have now. We need that right now.
I know.
We needed to have a big boom to wake a lot of people up that said, well, you know what, that's an LA thing, or that's a New York thing.
It's not.
Those things happen every day in Evansville, they happen in Milwaukee, they happen in Tougaloo, Mississippi. It's not an isolated issue, and it's something that everyone, no matter what ethnicity, age, gender, because here's the thing, if you say it's not my problem, or it'll never happen to me, think about those tragic instances where you had 58 people being murdered in Las Vegas that just wanted to go to a concert. Yeah. These young African American men that have been murdered through police brutality for things that are ridiculous. Women that have, for many, many years, went to work and did not feel safe because they were being assaulted or harassed by their employer. I mean, these are all things that we have to talk about.
And it's funny, we've got a couple minutes here before we're up on our first break, but you and I have talked, and it just seems like, I'm not going to throw anybody's names out there, but some of our classmates that are still here in the Evansville area, I've had some discussions with them about some of the issues you brought up, and I'm like, what can we do? What can we do? And I keep going back to that mobile movie studio in everybody's hand, the instant gratification society, the 24/7 news cycle, and the fact that you can be manipulated that way. And sometimes things are actually, it's there in black and white. You can see the video. The tape don't lie, to use a football term.
That's a great, yes.
But there are certain entities on all sides of these discussions that are trying to manipulate the masses. I call it the uninformed 85%, because there's only about 15% of the public engaged at a given time.
Wow.
When you think about it.
Yeah,
When you're out there and you're trying to get your word out, you're trying to teach leadership, you're trying to do what you want to do, there's 85% of us that at the end of the day, they just want to go to work, they want to go home, they want to plug into their little internet world at the end of the night, play some online games and stuff like that. And they're just completely oblivious to what's really going on in the world. And one of the things I like to hit on is, a lot of these groups that are trying to target that 85% to try to get them to their side of opinion, they're using a playbook with roots back to the 1960s that might not be playing too well here in 2018. When you think about it, and that's on many different issues.
That's a great point.
And that's what I just think. I think that, America, you have a right to protest. You need protest to have a healthy republic like we have. People need to have that right, but you can't just keep, like I always hate to throw out the sports reference, but at 42, Cookie hadn't changed much. He still throws out the football reference from time to time, and it just seems to me that the playbook has gotten stale, and that we, as our generation, the 40-somethings, or any, age is just a number, any generation that wants to become engaged, they need to work on redefining that playbook so that they can better go after that 85% and transition those folks into an area of getting more involved. One quick question, I need to do a little housekeeping here as we're up on our first break. I want to remind folks that are listening to Leadership Connection here on 98.5 WEOA, online, leadershipevansville.org, at Leadership Evansville on Facebook and Twitter. We're going to take our brief time out. We'll be right back. You're listening to Leadership Connection here on 98.5 WEOA.
Awesome.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Cook here, sitting in for Lynn Miller P's Leadership Connection 98.5. Saturday morning tradition here. I'm with Denise Thomas, Evansville native. And your official title, you're a businesswoman now here up in Milwaukee, president and owner of the Effective Communication Coach LLC, in town on this pre-recorded here. Had a big conference today, young professional conference out at USI. We're able to get you in here. Former classmate and colleague of mine. We talk a little bit more about your background history. You ended up in Milwaukee. You worked for Miller Coors, correct?
I did.
Now, how do you end up with, they're the number 2 beverage?
Yes,
in the world?
They are the number 2. Last time I checked, beer manufacturer.
Wow.
In the U.S.
Back in the fraternity house at Wabash College, that would have been a dream job.
It was. It was great to work for Miller Coors.
And I just, you probably got to see a lot of things through working for Miller Coors.
I did.
How far did you travel? I mean, did you cover other countries or mainly here in North America?
I traveled mainly domestically, spent a great deal of time in Golden, Colorado, which is where the core side of Miller Coors is headquartered and based.
I always envision in Golden, Colorado, they have the Smokey and the Bandit movie on loop, because back when a simpler time when, Coors beer was bootleg in the east of the Mississippi, I always envisioned that in my head, back when I was in college, but I know that's probably not the case.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Hey, imagination is a great thing, and definitely had some great travel opportunities and saw a lot of America throughout my tenure at Miller Coors.
I tell you, did you have any stops before Miller? I know you were at Miller for a long time, if I'm not mistaken.
I was at Miller for 4 years. Prior to that, I worked for General Electric Healthcare, so GE Healthcare, which was also a great experience, especially as it relates to my leadership style, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. In terms of grassroots, I started realizing just the importance of collaboration, teamwork, continuous improvement through my experience here in Princeton at the Toyota Motor Manufacturing facility or plant. And I worked there as a co-op for about 2 years.
And for our listeners out there that might not know what a co-op is, what does that mean?
So a co-op, in a 3-second definition, is a paid internship.
Nice.
So it's a formal program through a local university where you attend school for a semester and then you work full-time. And you do that subsequently for about 2 to 4 semesters.
One of the things I always, when I get to speak to young adults that are in college and even non-traditional students, and they ask me if I had one thing to change about my college experience up at Wabash College, what would it be? And it's that internship opportunity.
Yes.
I came back in the summer times and worked 3 jobs because I had it drilled in my head that I needed to get a job at work. But I don't feel like I did the best I could as going after those paid internships to where I could have got real world experience and got a little bit of money and been able to do that. And if I made one mistake personally in college, it was not pursuing those type of opportunities. So one of the things when I have the opportunity to talk to these young students, I always say, get an internship, make it work, even if it's not the financial windfall that you're expecting. Student loans and grants are there for a reason. They're to help students, and there's more than just buying books and paying for classes. that's out there. There's no excuse in the world today, regardless of your background, to not go after that education. There
Completely
are plenty
agree.
of opportunity. And it just, you know, when you hear people talk about it's like, you know, get out there, apply. You might not be at the school that you want to get to start with. You might have to go to a junior college. You might have to go to a technical college. Get out there, get off your, you know, I better not say that, but you know, we are on the air, but you know, get off your butt and get it going, because there's no excuses. And I mean, my dad used to hate excuses, and I've tried to transition that over to, you know, what I do here with leadership and stuff locally. Now, we talked a little bit about your background. Were there any other employment opportunities? I mean, at what point did you wake up and realize, hey, I want to go into business for myself. I want to be the effective communication coach. When did you have that epiphany?
Well, I've been the effective communication coach since I was 3. So I've been, Chris, I mean, you know this.
I'm not
I've been
gonna doubt that.
talking since I was 3 years old, and I was always passionate
There's
about.
one person, you know, I can talk a good game too, but there's one person that I wouldn't want to debate you. I would not want to debate you, and that's even to this day. You know, because I'm still kind of opinionated myself, you know, a little
As
bit.
you should be.
As I should be, but you know, I've toned it down a little bit in my older age. But you've been the effective communication coach. I can see that since a 3. Could you imagine if we had these handheld mobile devices?
I would be a lot further. But
You'd
you
be
know,
a
it's all
YouTube
about
sensation. That's what
thank
you'd
you.
be.
It's all about timing, and you know, for me, especially having my own company and being my own full-time employee. You have to remind
That's leadership
yourself.
on its own. Right
Absolutely, and it's a leadership like no other. So kudos to everyone out there who's listening that has their own business. I realized when I was 3, I think probably around 2010, 2011, I started to have that self-talk where I was taking my vision and actually putting it out there in the universe through the power of words. So, you know, there's a saying where you speak things as if they already were.
Yeah.
So I started to talk to people and say, you know, I'm going to have my own business, or I have a company known as the Effective Communication Coach, and I'm going to have, you know, subsidiary effective communication coaches, and we're going to travel all around the world and really help others understand why it's so important to be an effective communicator.
What's the farthest you've traveled so far since you've been out on your own?
Oh man, I did a session broadcasted from Cairo, Egypt.
Wow.
Last October, and I'm not that great.
Was it I mean, did you have a translator there? Or?
No, so I broadcasted from Cairo, Egypt. The majority of the individual, and keep in mind, Egypt's biggest commodity is tourism.
Yeah.
So most of the people
I
in
didn't
Egypt,
think
in
about
addition,
they
to
would
their
speak
native tongue,
English.
they also speak English. So having a translator is not.
I didn't even think about that.
That's okay.
That makes perfect sense.
That's why we have these
That's why we have
conversations.
the effective communication coach with us, so that I can get communicated on. But that makes perfect sense. So you actually got to fly over there to Egypt for that?
I did. I have a friend of mine who owns a travel business, and he basically is a person who can facilitate groups and get them together to do things in terms of travel they wouldn't do. And I also, this is why it's important. So let me just say this too, as it relates to leadership. It's so important to every day let people know what your mission and vision is in life. Because the more and more that you tell people, then when a certain opportunity comes up, they're going to say, oh, I need to call Chris Cook. That's part of his mission and vision. He would be great at that.
Yeah.
And so when I was talking to a friend of mine who has a video series, he said, you know what? It would be incredible if we broadcasted the show, have you as the special guest from Egypt. And it was open to anyone. And we had guests from all over.
Wow.
So that definitely was an opportunity that resulted in me telling people what my mission is.
But it's like when I've had the opportunity to sit in for Lynn and I saw that you were going to be in town, I'm like, I have to get Denise on here.
Exactly,
Because,
and thank you for that.
Well, and the listeners out here need to be exposed to successful folks that might not be, residing in Evansville currently, but you have family still in the area. You're back a lot, correct?
Yes, of course, all my family from my father's side is here, and my parents are still here. Been married for 50 years as of last week.
Wow,
So shout out
congratulations.
to Nurse Thomas and Papa T.
Papa T. The thing is, what I was getting at is, I had that opportunity, and I'm like, I want Denise to have this voice to speak, because when you look back across using our Harrison class as an example, and I look at the group, because we both work on the reunions and stuff, and you see the diversity in our graduating class.
Right.
Of all these individuals. I feel like the George Bailey of the class because I stayed, the wonderful life guy, I stayed in Bedford Falls here in Evansville, and I never left. But when you look at all of our classmates that have done big things like yourself, we're very blessed. I mean, to have what we have here. And I can only imagine traveling to Egypt. But is there any company or opportunity in the time that you've been doing it that stands out, or like a story that you want to share with the listeners here on Leadership Connection?
Sure. In terms of companies that stand out, I stopped putting perimeters out there. If you would have asked me that question about a year ago, I would have said Google, Amazon, these big companies that are have a large presence in terms of our society. I stopped having that type of language or mindset because I want to work with companies that view their human resources as the most valuable asset and want every employee, no matter if they are a C-suite level executive or an entry level intern, new hire, to feel connected and valued.
One of the things that sounds along the lines of what I try to preach, in my daily job here as superintendent of city cemeteries, I have a team, and I as a leader, and this can be applied to any leadership field or any scenario, I will not put my team in a situation that I would not put myself in. Mm-hmm. And I know with, when you hear these big companies like the Googles and stuff of the world, you kind of get taken aback. You don't see that type of leadership when you're just looking at it at a glance, but to me, those smaller opportunities would almost be as rewarding as the larger ones because you can really get down to that ground level with a smaller company that wants to invest in their workforce because that's the future. That's where you make profits. You put the people in the situations you put yourself in, and guess what? They're going to be more productive, and they're going to make more revenue, and they're going to serve the customers better. It all adds up. It has a snowball effect. And
don't get me wrong, Cookie, if Google called me tomorrow, I'll be on the first day smoking. But I just want to make sure that everyone understands that it's not about just focusing on quantity. It's about making sure that the quality is there and that it directly ties to what you love to do and the gifts that you can provide as part of your passion.
Now, you mentioned Egypt. I see in the bio you've also been to China and Israel?
Yes. So went to Hong Kong, China, and that was in March of 2017.
Wow.
And also went to Thailand just recently in January. And my son and I went to Europe. So we visited London and Paris, and then I took a little getaway to Munich in Germany. Travel, y'all. Evansville. If you're not, because here's the biggest misconception, Cookie. You don't have to have a ton of money in your bank account to travel international. So the first thing I want everybody to do is take that perception out of your brain. Do it. Eat, pray, and love, man. Eat, pray, and live. Live your best life. Find out the resources that you need, but just go travel. Go see the world.
I'm not trying to judge here or anything, but Munich in Germany, in Deutschland. What about Munich drew you there? Because when I think Denise Thomas, I don't necessarily think Munich's going to be on the itinerary unless it was a job-related thing.
No,
or were you prospecting any? Did you have any companies you talked to over there?
I didn't because
it was purely a vacation.
It was purely a vacation. However, to your point, anytime that I'm anywhere, it's always an opportunity to connect with people. However, Munich, this is the wonderful thing about when you travel international. Most discounted fares, we're going to take this to a whole other topic, require layovers. And oftentimes when you are traveling to London and you want to get to Paris, and then when you want to get from Paris back to the U.S., you have anywhere from a 10 to sometimes even 18-hour layover. Okay. And so I received the gift of Munich, Germany, based on my itinerary. Okay. So although it wasn't planned, I definitely took advantage of the sights and experience of Munich.
With my German background and my family, I've always wanted to go to southern Germany, to Bavaria and stuff. But I've been a little scared. I'm like B.A. Baracus. I don't get on a plane, too well, because the planes aren't big man friendly flying out of Evansville, if you know what I mean. Right now, we need to get that first class session going, so I can purchase a little bit bigger, make my ride comfortable there. But to have those opportunities in Munich and China and Hong Kong, what's the climate like over there for a servant leader?
Oh, wonderful. Hong Kong. the world itself, as I've been traveling to different countries, everyone who I have come across China and Thailand and England and France, Israel, everyone is so loving. And you know what I hate the most, Cookie, is that how we see these countries, via
The
certain media
24/7 news cycle.
outlets.
Yeah.
And I get it, but one thing I want people to understand is that if there is something inside of you saying that I should go, and you know how like when you would tell somebody, well, I don't like lima beans. Well, I gotta eat lima beans first before I can make sure that I don't like lima beans before say I don't like lima beans. So that's the same thing as far as I'm concerned, is that when I went to those countries, people were so kind. They embraced us. It was a wonderful experience.
Okay. And that's what I always hear when you get down to the man on the street or the woman on the street level. There's not much difference between you and I.
No. The common denominator is love and respect.
Well, hold that thought. We're up at the bottom of the hour. We got to take another break. You're listening to Leadership Connection here on 98.5 WEOA. Chris Cook sitting in for Lynn Miller P. We'll be right back after this brief timeout. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Cook sitting in for Lynn Miller Pease here, Leadership Connection, the Saturday morning tradition. I'm joined by Denise Thomas, Evansville native, amazing lady, a business owner, the Effective Communication Coach, LLC is her business. She's been there since the age of 3, I found out earlier. But you grew up in Evansville, product of the EBSC, as we talked on. If you had to give, in sales, I always say, get your elevator speech going, And an elevator speech for the listeners out there, that's about a 90-second to 2-minute spiel that if you only have that time in front of somebody to tell them the who, the what, the why, the when. If you had to give your servant leadership elevator speech, if you walked in and only had 90 seconds, what do you think that would be?
I could do it in 20.
Okay, go ahead.
My mission in life is to transform every emerging and existing professional into an extraordinary leader by mastering the art of effective communication.
That is strong. That is strong. So what's usually, when you give that, what's the next line of questions that the individual you would give that spiel to ask?
Well, to go back after I say that, I can either further expand on, do you know, Chris, how companies lose millions of dollars every year when top talented individuals leave, not because lack of competency or technical aptitude, but because they did not feel connected or valued. They didn't feel as though they had a voice at the table. They didn't feel that they had the type of productive and cohesive relationships to grow within that company, and they leave. I help companies not only become aware of what's causing that, but keep people in-house and grow and become more effective contributors and leaders by, again, mastering the art of effective communication.
So, you give that spiel, you get the folks lined up. Have you had any success stories from people that you've transitioned into the world of servant leadership through your tutelage?
I have, and I'm so humbled and I'm so grateful and thankful for all of the clients, whether they're individuals or nonprofit organizations or of course,
because you're working with the young Evansville professionals, I believe, or the...
Correct. I've been fortunate to have a number of organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit, reach out to me and say, you know what, you're right. Communication is something that is not a soft skill. It's not a soft skill. It is a critical component, and we've seen too many losses, too many opportunities that tie directly to that. And again, I have clients such as Northwestern Mutual, Stanley Black & Decker, and Milwaukee Associated Bank. I've worked with nonprofits such as the YMCA.
When I do some of these international things, from the cemetery stuff, and I've spoke on the big stages at our conferences, I always get asked this question: are there more like you back home? Do you ever get asked that in Milwaukee? I just have to ask because you're a successful, independent woman, and I can only imagine they're probably like, Evansville, Indiana. Are there any more Denise Thomases just rolling out, ready to happen? You know
what, Cookie? Based on the Young Professionals Conference today, the answer is absolutely 1,000% yes. Please, next year, if you can, attend the YP conference, because you talk about the next pipeline of talent, future and existing leaders. 168 were in that room today at USI, and the majority of them, if not all of them, were from Southwest Indiana.
Again, and we're with Denise Thomas joining us here at Leadership Connection. We are pre-recording this for Saturday because Denise is in town. She was able to be the keynote speaker of the Young Professional Conference out at USI earlier today, and we're blessed to be joined by her. Now we're going to get back to some more questions. We're going to get a little bit out there. Let's say Marty showed up and then Doc Brown, we got the DeLorean out. We're going to get up to 88 miles an hour. We can go anywhere. And I give you the keys to the DeLorean. And I say, Denise, you can have 15 minutes to go find any leader throughout time and talk to for motivation. Who would you go see in the DeLorean? Who would you get up to 88 miles an hour for and go back in time and talk to anybody, like a mentor or leader? It doesn't have to be anybody famous, but is there any leader that you can think of off the top of your head if you could travel anywhere in time to go have 15 minutes with?
That's a great question. I'm going to say Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman. What would be some of the questions and the expected responses that you think you would get from her?
Well, the first thing I would say to her is thank you. It's the first thing. In that type of, based on what history has educated us on.
I hope our listeners out there know Harriet.
Okay,
Tubman,
so
you might want to just update, just in case, because
yes,
not everybody has the Harrison education.
True that. So if you want to Google Harriet Tubman, again, first name Harriet, last name Tubman, she was the lady who pioneered the Underground Railroad during the time of 1850s, the term of American slavery. She, to me, is one of the most, if not the most courageous leader. And of course, we can't say modern day history, but I mean, when you think about what she did, I can't think of someone else who had such courage, especially when you have two dynamics. You had someone who was black, and then you had the fact that she was a woman.
And in 1858-ish,
Right.
That was not a winning hand most of the time.
No.
I mean, I'm not saying,
Absolutely.
But that was not,
It wasn't, and I think that's what we have to start to take a step back and really, when we talk about leadership, there is no such thing as, to me, servant leadership. Servant is the most critical piece of being a leader. If you're not servant and you're not serving others as part of your leadership, then you're not a leader. Like, I don't see anything else outside of being a leader who serves.
And I agree. With her, I don't know where I would start the questions. I would want to know what motivated her to make those choices to get to that.
Me too.
I mean, what was there one incident that just kind of was like enough? I'm going to do something. I would like to, if I had the opportunity to sit shotgun in the DeLorean with you, I would chime in and say, Denise, may I have a question? I'd be like,
your question was exactly what I wanted. Can I have a question?
I just want to know what one singular moment was like your enough is enough moment to push you in that direction to become that type of leader and that type of icon, because you think about how many folks, how many lives she touched. Even to this day, there's a lot of folks that can draw some of their family lineage back to some of the success stories of her transitioning folks from the South to the North.
You know what else I want to ask too, Cookie? What encouraged you or what motivated you to go back? Because you could have said, you know what, I'm going to free 10 slaves and then I'm going to just focus on me and go to the North and call it a day. She kept going back. And
there was Underground Railroad stops here in the Evansville area. A lot of folks don't realize the Carpenter Home, the old WEOA station.
Look at you, Cookie, schooling some black history.
Schooling some black history.
Come on, Cookie.
I know it's not just black. I know American history.
I love it.
But to me, American history is a history of us all.
That's right.
And that's one of the things I always like to, when Cookie turns in his 2%, or his 2 cents worth, I like to say it's the history of us all.
That's right.
And that's what people need to understand. American history isn't white or black. It's American history.
Absolutely.
And I think that we need to get a lot of that stuff out of the way, because when you put those, I believe black history is very important to learn. I think in our lifetime, we've done a lot better as far as teaching it, but there's still tremendous opportunities to learn not just black or white, but all of our history.
All of it.
Because if you don't know where you came from, you are doomed to make the same mistakes. And that's what just, everybody's like, well, how can you lead through using history as a leadership tool?
Mm-hmm.
You have to communicate. You have
Right.
to know the story. You can control so much if you can control the message.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things in college in particular I learned to craft my, two things you want to have control over. You want to have control over the finances. You also want to control the message.
Right.
And if you can communicate effectively and you can keep the finances in line, you can lead any organization at a very high level.
And you know what? Let me piggyback off of what you mentioned too. No, I love what you said, and I'm so glad that it came from you when you said what you said. Also, we have to make sure that the sources that we're using to read the history or watch the history are credible. And I know there's different perspectives from different people that lived, and that's why or lived in that recorded, because when we were in high school, and I'll be candid, when we talked about Black history, it was Martin Luther King. You maybe got some Harriet Tubman thrown into there and some Frederick Douglass, but we didn't really go into the layers of how these things came. Rosa Parks.
We started to get into Malcolm X because the movie came out, and that was
Exactly.
the only reason. I believe it was 1992 again. It wasn't too long after it was 91 or 92. It was
You're
like
right.
our freshman or sophomore
Yeah,
year.
no, you're right.
And I remember we only got into that was because of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And when I
And the hype.
And the hype.
Yeah.
And I remember they would let students go,
Yep.
if you recall. And Showplace East at the time, or I think it might have just been Showplace. Well, they were still.
Showplace.
They were still.
Yeah.
But East, they would bus some folks over, and you were able to watch that opportunity. And it was it opened up a lot of eyes and started some conversations. It exposed me to Malcolm X. I would have not been able to. I probably wouldn't have been reading Malcolm X's works,
Right.
if it wasn't for that movie. But there's a lot of opportunities. It was very. I don't want to use the term vanilla, but it was like a watered down. You got the generic version of African American history.
And you make up a great point, because I'm sure, just like Harriet Tubman, and I'm sure just like Martin Luther King, it wasn't just them solo. They had a group of supporters or a team, for lack of better words, that were helping them as part of the process. Because there can sometimes in our society only be one. But I would love to have a conversation to go back to your question, to Harriet and say, how did you bring others with you? What motivated you? Who helped you? What was the game plan? What was your strategy? All of these things that helped her do something so extraordinary in that current day and time, to where she is now still someone who is a revolutionist and a revolutionary, pioneer, game changer, servant leader, all those things in one.
Well, that's a good use to get the Mr. Fusion going and getting up to 88 miles an hour and going
Yes.
to talk to Harriet Tubman. When we're talking Black history, one of the names that always popped up to me when I did my study of African American history was George Washington Carver, and how a lot of what he did for science is, still being used to this day. And I don't feel that he got the true push that he could have when we were in high school. Now, I don't know the way it's taught now, but I always liked some of the stuff that he had done, through my training and stuff like that. But it just seemed like we had that cookie cutter version of history where you got your part,
No pun
we got
intended.
our. Yeah, that's what I said. I worked it in subtly. You caught it. I knew it wouldn't work here, but my Jedi mind tricks don't work on Denise Thomas. Let me tell you. But along those lines, we talk about the influence of that movie. The Malcolm X movie in the early '90s. Is there an author, a speaker, or a movie that when Denise Thomas is kind of down, does she go to for motivation? For leadership motivation? Is there something on your shelf at home that you go to read? Is there a speaker or a personal mentor that you might reach out to kind of recharge your batteries? When you're being the communication coach for all these folks, you can get burned out yourself. I'm not saying you do, but is there a go-to that you have to kind of transition away from that feeling when you do get there?
I don't have a particular individual, but I will say this. I enjoy watching documentaries, and I'll tell you why, and this is one of the reasons why I love Netflix. Most of the people that have done some extraordinary things in this world, for me, have been musicians. Fun fact that you may not know about Denise Thomas is I love 80s and 70s rock. My kids will tell you growing up, when they were growing up, I used to play Fleetwood Mac, AC/DC, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Elton John. So I love, a lot of pop and rock. Anywho, I said that to say this. I love documentaries because those individuals, there wasn't social media.
Yeah.
So I love to hear people's story. My role models are people like you, people that are using their platform, whether it's a microphone, whether it's a stage, and this is actually a form of a stage, to help people share their story, their background, their experiences. Those are people who I gravitate to. I love people who are walking in their purpose.
And I like people that walk the walk and they talk the talk.
Yes.
That you can smell BS a mile away. I
Yes.
know I can. I got a BS detector that's built. I hate to, can I say that on here? But the thing is, I just feel like it's ingrained. I always like to say I've got 1970s technology, being born in 1976. But,
Right.
But, the BS detector was standard equipment. I don't know if necessarily everybody has it, or it might have a little different algorithm setting type for today's BS detectors. But it just, it seems like there's a tremendous opportunity to kind of sniff through that. And if I'm not buying what you're selling, I have a gut instinct within about 2 minutes. I'll know if you're really doing it or not. We're up on a hard break here. We got to take our final timeout.
Sure.
Hold that thought. You're listening to Leadership Connection here on 98.5 WEOA. Chris Cook sitting in for Lynn Miller Pease. We'll be right back after this brief timeout. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Cook sitting in here for Lynn Miller Pease, Saturday morning tradition on WEOA Leadership Connection. LeadershipEvansville.org is our website. At Leadership Evansville on social media on both Facebook and Twitter. Check the website for everything leadership here in Evansville. We enjoy those of you listening in today. I'm with Denise Thomas, Evansville native. We're pre-recording this show because she is in town talking to young professionals. As an amazing professional herself, we talked about your elevator speech. We talked about your historical influences. What current projects or initiatives do you have that you're working on that you want to share here with the listeners on Leadership Connection?
Current projects and initiatives. I am working with some incredible people and some incredible companies that, again, have embraced the importance and the significance of effective communication as part of their business growth strategy. Some are public officials, some are CEOs, some are individuals who do some more grassroots nonprofit efforts. Just a lot of great things going on. And Chris, one of the things I want to leave people with as they're listening is when you do what you love, whatever the compensation that you're seeking, it will come. It will come organically. When I left, or I don't want to say left, when I started to focus on my passion, because I didn't leave anything, I was walking towards something. I've never had to want or go without. And when you are a giving person and you're using your gifts to help others, you're putting that out in the universe, it's going to come back to you double fold. So that's why I want to make sure that I thank everyone, every individual that has said, Denise, I want to invite you to come and speak. Denise, I want to hire you. Denise, and including yourself, I cannot thank you enough.
Well, I can't thank you because, to be a product here of the community in Evansville and to come back and to speak to young professionals, we need more leaders like you that we produce here, homegrown. They go on to the big city of Milwaukee and become very successful.
Have you been to Milwaukee?
Yeah. I've been through there on train before. My grandmother's from outside of La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Everybody says La Crosse, okay.
And it's about 20 miles west of La Crosse, or east of La Crosse is where our family's from up there. So I'm like 1/4 Wisconsinner, I guess. Is that? I can't.
We'll take it.
I don't know if that's the official, or Cheddarhead or whatever they call each other. Cheesehead up there. But the train out of Chicago goes through Milwaukee. Then before it veers over and kind of mirrors, I think it's 90 or 94.
Yep, you got it.
Madison. I spent, in college, I spent a couple weekends in Madison. I don't really remember. Madison, Wisconsin, I believe, per capita, would be big proponents of Miller Coors.
Absolutely.
When you see, I'll just leave it at that. Those conversations.
Well, you have to come back to Milwaukee. Milwaukee was featured in Vogue magazine as one of the most underrated city in the U.S. right now. It's growing in a good way.
And a lot of folks that haven't seen Milwaukee, they're like, man, where have I seen it from? And I'm going to date myself, and this is probably going to turn off those millennials, but Laverne and Shirley, the
Oh, yeah.
opening
Happy
sequences
Days.
and Happy Days. Those were all the backdrops were of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So if you're trying to create that picture in your mind of what Milwaukee, now granted it's a little dated there, but
It does not look the
but
same.
it
I'll
does
tell
not
you
look the
that.
same, but kind of give you that feel. It's like that's why it has that familiarity. But you talk about Milwaukee. Is there anything? One of my mentors in the industry, the cemetery industry that I'm in, always talks about R&D. And when you think about R&D, you think about research and development. He doesn't call it that way. He calls it rob and duplicate. As you try to, find out what's working in other parts of the country or another business, kind of rob and duplicate some of the ideas that you feel might mirror match some of your own initiatives, and then move forward. Is there anything that you've been a part of in Milwaukee that you think that we might be able to rob and duplicate and bring it back here or back home to Evansville? I mean, I see you've got a very diverse board membership and stuff of the Milwaukee community. And
Chris, you must be in my mind, because as I was attending and being engaged in today's YP conference, I thought, man, there's a lot of things that I've been fortunate enough to experience and learn and gain through my, residing in Milwaukee that I think would be great to socialize here in Evansville. See, again, that's that selfless mentality that you have, Cookie. It's like, what could we share? Because Milwaukee didn't always get it. Milwaukee is starting to have the same type of conversations and initiatives and growth. So yes, the answer is yes. I think the main thing is growth. And also talent retention. How do we get the next pipeline of talent?
it is so easy
To either stay here or because there's a ton of transplants in Evansville.
Yeah.
I met a few today at the YP conference. How do we get those individuals to stay here and live here and retire here?
What concerned me about some of the transplants, and I never had this I was involved in Young Evansville Professionals and Rotaract and some of those clubs early on. And I never really paid attention because I was a native, I didn't have to worry about those concerns. But when I would hear from these people that had transplanted back to Evansville, some of the difficulties, I think we're the only place in the country where you can ask somebody, hey, where'd you go to school? Implying college.
Right.
But they'll tell you you're at high school. That doesn't happen up in Milwaukee. Everybody says, I went to Rice, I went to Harris, regardless if they went to college or not.
Right.
And that creates an unspoken barrier for these transplants right away, and it makes them feel very uncomfortable. So I found myself kind of falling into those traps like that. And after this was like 01-ish, maybe, about 18, 17 years ago, when I first started to realize that we need to embrace these folks to keep them.
Yes.
But we also need to do some things with making sure that we keep the talent we have here, here wherever possible. Because it is very easy to go to Indianapolis, to go to Chicago, to go to Milwaukee, go to Atlanta. Nashville is one of the fastest growing places in the entire country. I believe 1,500 people a month move there.
Yep.
Some crazy number like that. It's 2.5 hours or 2.5 hours to the south. Clarksville, Tennessee, for that matter.
The main reason why anyone leaves any relationship, whether that's where they work or reside, is two things, Cookie. They don't feel connected or valued. I left Evansville when I was, 25, 26? I'm 42 now. And the reason why I left Evansville, bottom line, is because I did not feel like I had opportunities here. I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel like, based on what my overall vision of success. And let me be clear, I'm not dinging Evansville. This is my home. I love this town. And anytime I can come back and help this community grow, I owe that. I will always be, when people ask me Milwaukee, where I'm from, I don't say Indianapolis, I don't say Indiana, I am from Evansville, Indiana, and I will say y'all until the day I die. There's no you or all, it's y'all.
And you try to explain to people, I live a mile and a half from Kentucky on the southeast side of Evansville. And you try to explain to people, I've been in northern Indiana before in some of my business stuff. And they'll say, well, what part of the South are you from? And I'm like, I'm from southern Indiana,
Right.
and but you cross that river, it's a different transition. And we're talking a matter of a couple miles. You could tell a little bit of dialect issues just by crossing that body of water. But how many people, when you're up there in Milwaukee and say, I'm from Evansville, Indiana, how many people actually have heard of it?
A lot.
That's what I'm saying.
A lot. A lot of people say either I've driven through Evansville, I've worked in Evansville, I have a relative who lives in Evansville. So Evansville is on the map. Shout out to Eville.
The League of Their Own thing is huge. It seems like when I travel, they'll know Bossy Field.
Yes.
And that's amazing how one movie that's been, over 25 years ago now, can have that impact still today. We're like, that's in Evansville, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, that is. They've seen my hometown, and It's an icebreaker.
I love to tell people that, especially I'll pick on Philip Lawrence, Evansville native. You know, so many people all around the world love Bruno Mars.
Yeah.
And when I say, you know, Bruno Mars' right-hand man, Philip Lawrence, yeah, he's from Evansville, Indiana. They're like, what? And, you know, talk about like Walter McCarty, Dave Mattingly. There are so many amazing people that are doing incredible things that are from Evansville, Indiana. But also shout out to the unsung heroes. Yeah. So if you're listening and you're doing dope stuff, even though you may not be getting a Grammy or an NCAA championship, keep doing it.
And let Leadership Evansville know, because, you know, we have the Leadership Evansville Awards every year, and we're always looking for nominations. And folks, if you're doing something, let us know. And you can find out about that at leadershipevansville.org.
Love it.
But the thing is, you know, you talk about those different things. If you had somebody, you know, somebody's listening today, they're on the couch, regardless of age, and they're thinking about getting involved. Do you have like some advice, some final thoughts as we wrap up the show with about 6 minutes to go? Any advice you would give to transition that person from the couch to action? You know, to become from that 85% we spoke of earlier, get them in that 15% of engaged folks.
Right. The first thing that you're going to have to do is some cleanup. And what that means is that you're going to have to take a step back, and you're going to have to remove any distractions that are taking away from your passion, whether that's people, whether that's places, whether that's food, anything that's a distraction to you being dope. You already know what your purpose is. People always say, you know, Denise, how did you find your purpose? The thing is, I always had it in me. I'll give you an example really quick, and I always share this example. The Wizard of Oz. We had the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion.
Okay.
And they met Dorothy, and they said, we got to get to the Wizard of Oz so we can get some courage, we can get a brain, and we can get a heart.
Yep.
Throughout the entire movie, they demonstrated all of the entities of being courageous, of being intelligent, and being loving. And they always had it, but they allowed people around them or experience to diminish that. So that's the first thing you have to do, is take a step back and say, you know what, I'm not trying anymore, I'm doing. And it starts right now.
Is that a different approach if you're dealing with a millennial versus maybe somebody that's a senior?
Absolutely, it's a different approach, because Generation X, baby boomers, and traditionalists were socialized completely different than millennials. What I love about millennials is that they have broken the status quo of saying, no, I'm not going to work 30 years for the same employer and, you know, get 2 steps ahead in 10 years. You know, we talk about millennials wanting instant gratification, but they also want instant results, and they also want to have instant impact. They don't want to take 10 years to do something that can take 10 minutes. So shout out to the millennials for getting things done. Seriously.
I think there's a lot of knocks on them that they're not deserving. You know,
absolutely not.
There are so many people that, you know, pile on that, and I've seen a lot of awesome individuals that are of a younger age. But, you know, like you talked about, to grow up in that instant gratification society where you have the mobile movie studio in your hand, and you got Facebook, you got social media, I would not want to be them. We didn't have that, you know, when we were technically of our millennial ages. And it just seems to me like to be able to traverse all the opportunities for going wrong. I mean, because if you make a mistake now, everybody can find out about it. You know, and a lot of folks aren't as forgiving and giving those second chances. And I am glad that we did not have that level of scrutiny back when you and I were in our 20s, you know, and stuff like that. Because I know, you know, I would have been able to grow and learn as effectively because everybody'd be looking at what I'm doing on social media.
You know, every generation, every preceding generation has well, when I grew up, it was like this, or you had way better than I did. So every generation, I find myself doing it now too. You know, one thing for me is the concept of being able to download music instantly. Yeah. And I think about when my heart was broke when the Hills department store, shout out Eville, y'all remember Hills? Was it Burlington's coat factory now?
Yeah, but there's something else moving in there. They moved Burlington since you were last year, so.
Okay, so that's where
Hills would have been, there were 2 locations. One's where the neighborhood Walmart is now on First Avenue in Diamond. And the other was behind where the Donut Bank is on Green River and Lloyd.
Yes, so that one sold out when the album Bad by Michael Jackson. So let me just say this. Whatever generation you come from, there's an opportunity to collaborate with a different generation to understand what you can leverage, because millennials can look at Gen Xers or baby boomers and say, you know what? You come from a time where loyalty was everything, so you know how to really build and sustain those relationships. We're not very good at that because we don't have a lot of opportunities to face. We do a lot of texting. And then Gen Xers and baby boomers can say, you know what? We didn't have the level of technology that you guys have now. And we noticed that the agility that is applied in your work performance gets a lot of things done quickly. So let's collaborate. Let's leverage our different skills based on our generation and change the world for the better.
Well, I tell you what, Denise Thomas here, Leadership Connection, Leadership Evansville. The hour is almost up. We got about a minute to go. Believe it or not, I knew it would go quickly with you.
This was so much fun.
I mean, I appreciate you coming in. Denise Thomas, the Effective Communication Coach, LLC. And your website again is?
realcomcoach.com. That's REALCO Mary Coach.com. realcomcoach.com.
And if somebody wanted to email you or get in touch with you after this broadcast, they could just shoot you an email?
They can shoot me an email at denise@realcomcoach.com. Give me a shout out on social media. Again, that's realcomcoach.com. Or you can call my office at area code 414-409-8027.
Denise Thomas, Evansville native, independent businesswoman. Thanks for being my guest
Thank
today.
you, Chris. Thank you so much.
I'll let you have the last word. Any final thoughts here for the listeners?
Go out today and be great.
I can't top that. Well, that's going to end this show this week. Lynn will be back next week. You've been listening to Leadership Connection on 98.5 WEOA. Until next week, thanks for listening.